There is a charming romantic story that comes to us from 1882 during the presidency of Chester Alan Arthur, the 21st President of the United States. He took office at a very difficult time because his predecessor, James A. Garfield, had been assassinated after only a few months in office. And Garfield had run on a platform of cleaning up the Republican Party, getting rid of all the patronage and the corruption and doing everything based on the civil service system. And he was shot by an assassin who killed him because he wanted Chester Arthur, who was the vice president, to become president. In fact, when he shot Garfield, he said, "Garfield is dead and now Chester Arthur is going to be president." And the reason he wanted Arthur is Arthur was corrupt as you could get. He had run the customs house in New York and skimmed off huge amounts of money and was the key figure in maintaining the New York political machine. But when Arthur took office, he got a letter from a young woman who he didn't know, had never met, never heard from before, named Julia Sand, S-A-N-D. And these letters were not discovered until 1958, when Arthur's letters were put up for history by his grandson. And Julia wrote him saying, "You've lived essentially a sinful life until now. You've been wallowing in corruption. You've made a lot of money. But now is the time for you to rise above this. You've been made president by an act of God, and he expects you to capture that divine spark within you and change the way you live and the way you work and your political priorities." And Arthur read the letter, saved it, and didn't answer it though. And Julia wrote him several times in the same vein, pleading for him to recognize the better angels of his nature. And Chester Arthur listened. He completely changed his policies as president. He refused to appoint a political hack to head the customs house. He put a good guy in there. He vetoed a bill for harbors and rivers that the Republicans wanted because of its patronage. And then he passed a civil service law, setting up the first civil service system in this country, so that a lot of the federal workers were no longer selected through party patronage. And through it all, Julia wrote him. She wrote him 23 letters in all. They never met until about 2 years after she began writing. Arthur visited her in her brownstone in New York. She had been, despite being very young and very pretty, she was also fairly ill at times, and at times was an invalid. And without any notice, without saying he was coming, the president showed up at her door and went inside, and they chatted for about an hour with some of her family present. And nothing happened. They didn't touch. There was no implication of a romance there, although Arthur was a bachelor at the time. But the relationship deepened, and Julia sent him letters, constantly moving him in a positive direction. And he responded with alacrity, and the whole country was abuzz with the fact that this corrupt guy, who had been the poster child for patronage, graft, and corruption, completely changed, turned his back on all of the political bosses who had sponsored him, and moved to clean up the system. The momentum for Arthur was so strong that it looked like, despite the boss's opposition, he could get renominated. But Arthur, unbeknownst to anybody, including Julia, was dying of cancer. And a year after he left office, he died, so he didn't want to run for another term. And this entire chapter, this entire incredible romance, was unknown to historians until 1958. Such a cute story. Thought I'd share it with you. It comes from a wonderful book called Chester Arthur, The Unexpected President, by a guy named Scott. I think his last name is Greenberger, but if I'm getting that wrong, I got the title right. The Unexpected President. Worth reading and a lot of fun. Thanks for watching.